In the previous lesson, we created an EC2 instance. It was hosted inside a subnet, and that subnet was linked up to our VPC. The VPC had an internet gateway through which the data, or let's say the traffic, can go in and out. Okay, so that was the whole purpose of the previous lesson. In this lesson, let's go ahead and understand the NACLS, which stands for Network Access Control Lists and Security Groups. Let's understand this with a use case, okay? So I'm right now connected to the EC2 instance, right? So the IP address is 100.27.35.247 as you see on the top left hand side here, okay? Now that's the same IP address as you see right here. Now what I'm going to do here is install a IIS on this machine. So I'm going to make it a web server. So let's say we are hosting some kind of a web application on this. So because it's a Windows server, you need to have IIS installed on it. So I will go to this add roles and features, click on it, go through the wizard, and then install IIS. Okay, so that's the wizard. I'm going to hit next, next again. So I've got the roles section here, and then under that, just select IIS, accept this, add features, and then again follow through the wizard to complete the procedures. I'm just going to make it a plain, simple web server. I'll click on install and let the installation happen. So it looks like the installation is complete. I'm going to click on close and then close the server manager as well. Just go ahead and launch the IE and then navigate to http://localhost. Okay, so hit enter. What it should give me is the default IIS page, right? So this is the default IIS page. That means IIS is installed on this machine. What I can also try is navigating to this IP address, which is 100.27.35.247, right? I can try accessing it from external world. So I will launch my browser here and then navigate to this IP, or rather just say go to this IP address. Okay, now look at that, it's still in the connecting status. It will not work because there are no ports allowed to access the web application, right? So that's why it's not going to work. This is an HTTP website, so look at the message: check your connection, check the proxy and the firewall, and run network diagnostics. So what do we do in this case? Now, since this website is an HTTP traffic, we got to allow HTTP inbound for our EC2 instance. The traffic is two ways, inbound and outbound. The outbound traffic is allowed anyways, but the inbound traffic is always controlled with the help of security groups. Now on the right hand side, you see something called security groups. A security group is kind of a firewall that is attached to your EC2 instance. Now I'm going to click on this security group and show you what I mean. Now this security group has two kinds of rules. One is inbound and the second one is outbound. As you see, the outbound traffic is allowed for all kinds of traffic to the internet. That means any traffic that is going out from this virtual machine will be allowed on all ports and all protocols. That is because the outbound rules has the following rule, that all kinds of protocols are allowed on all ports to the internet. So all kind of traffic is allowed to go out from that virtual machine, from that EC2 instance. But what happens to inbound traffic? When we navigate to the IP address of the web application or the web server, it was an inbound traffic to that EC2 instance. So the only traffic that is allowed is port number 3389. What port is 3389 for? 3389 is for remote desktop protocol traffic. And that is why, and that is how I could connect to this virtual machine from my laptop using internet, right? Because the traffic is allowed inbound on port number 3389 to that IP address from the internet. Okay. Now, in order to have the HTTP rule as well, I need to allow and add an inbound rule. So I'm going to add a rule for the HTTP traffic. I have to find the HTTP in this list. It is 80 by default. And where do you want to allow it from? I want to allow it from the internet. Okay. And then just save it. Now, two kinds of ports are allowed inbound from the internet to the EC2 instance, and they are port number 80, which is HTTP or web traffic, port number 3389, RDP or remote desktop protocol traffic. Okay, now let's go ahead and refresh this page and see what happens. There you go. Immediately I'm able to access the web application. So this is more like a firewall which is connected to that EC2 instance. Now let's go back to the picture and understand where it is actually located. Now if you look at this, EC2 instance is our resource. Every resource has a security group attached to it. So you can then go ahead and modify the inbound rules and the outbound rules. There is one more thing called as NACLS. NACLS are attached at the subnet level. So I'm going to show that to you. So let's go to services and then navigate to the VPC. Under this section, you have something called as a NACL. NACL stands for Network Access Control List. Now this NACL is attached to our subnet. So there are two places where you're going to have firewalls. One is at the security group level and other is at the subnet level. And now because the traffic is allowed by default on the subnet from the internet, it is allowed. That's why we were able to access this page. You really do not have to modify things on the NACL side, but security group is more restrictive as compared to NACLs. If you modify anything on the NACL, then it will be applicable on all the resources inside that subnet. But if you modify something like an inbound rule or an outbound rule on the security group, then it will be applicable only to the resources that are linked to it. In this case, we have only one EC2 instance, so it will affect and impact just the EC2 instance. Things to remember, that security group are at the resource level, NACLs are at the subnet level.